What's up, Gator Nation? Zach Alaverdi and Nick Del Toro here, and it is Florida's first road game in SEC play as they travel to Kentucky, and it'll be my first trip to Lexington as Nick gets to show me around, and we'll be heading out on Friday. I hope everybody's looking forward to that game, and I know there's been certainly a lot of chatter coming off of the Charlotte win, Nick, which underwhelming, uninspiring. Some good things, some good, some bad, some ugly. We'll get into some of that, but we're going to talk obviously a lot about the game on Saturday, preview that matchup with KSR's Nick Roush during a segment to give you guys some perspective on the Wildcats. We'll answer some of your questions in the Q&A as well. Nick, how are you doing, my friend?
Doing well. Back from my illness and ready to go to Lexington. It's a cool little spot. Smaller stadium, but I think it gets kind of loud. And I don't know that I've been there for a noon game. I think most of the games I've been have either been 3:30 or night. So Mark Stoops encouraged BBN to wake up and pound some beers early and make the place loud.
Yeah, see, that's my thing. Like, I've been to Death Valley, but I haven't been for a night game yet, so I don't feel like I've been.
I've only been to one night game there, and listen, it's loud no matter what time they play there.
Yeah. So, but look, last time Florida went, it was loud for them. They had a ton of false starts, a ton of penalties. That was, if you think back, that was their first real road game because the year prior obviously was the COVID season. There wasn't packed stadiums like they saw the last time they went to Kroger Field. So
last time I went to Kroger Field, the fans ended up on it.
Yeah, what was that like? Were you on the field?
No. So it's a closed press box. Normally I would be down there on the field
because you were down there for the Freddie Swain catch.
Yes, I was. I was. I normally I would be down there. I don't know why I didn't go down on the field. But I have a video of it from the press box. It is weird. When you go up to when you're as north as Kentucky, everything is like closed press boxes.
Obviously.
So they have audio so you can kind of hear it, but it's like piped in audio.
Sure.
But yeah, that one was nuts. I remember being down there one year, and maybe it was 17, because Kentucky was winning that whole game. Florida ended up winning 28-7, but Kentucky was winning the whole game. And I'm down there on the field, and the fans were planning on rushing the field. And I asked the cop, I'm like, hey, are you guys going to let them on the field? And he looked at me. He's like, I mean, we can't stop them. I was like, okay. I was like, you are just here getting a paycheck, my guy. Not enough of zip ties or handcuffs, and probably a bunch of Kentucky fans there too that were just at that point, that was 30 straight wins. 2017 was the 31st, so the cops might have helped people down.
And I was on the field. I was on the field last year when the FSU fans rushed the field on Florida.
I was on the field last year
on 6-6 Florida.
Dude, that video went nuts on Twitter. I had the most polite field rushing by the Vanderbilt students who went single file line and then slowly walked onto the field. I'm like, this is bad. This is bad.
How many times did fans rush the field on Florida last year? Twice? Or was there a third game?
Twice. I think FSU and then Vanderbilt. Florida went 1-5 away from home last year, so there was plenty of opportunity.
They didn't do it at Tennessee.
No.
They did it against Alabama, obviously. They threw the goalpost in the river.
Straight into the river. Straight into the river.
And look, if Kentucky wins on Saturday, they might do that. I don't know if there's a river around Lexington.
They might not.
I don't know if there's a river around Lexington, but
when you win 3 in a row, it just becomes more expected. I don't know if they'd rush the field this time.
That's a good point. Well, it's
the
last time that Florida went to Lexington, that was the start of a 2-game winning streak for Kentucky. And, in in the offseason, Nick, I wrote a must-win games series, and I picked 5. And the number 1 on my list was Tennessee. And number 2 was this one. I feel like to have a 3-game losing streak to Kentucky just seems unheard of, but that's where Florida football has been the last 2 years, back-to-back 6 and 7 years. Kentucky's taken advantage. They've gotten back-to-back wins. They've been a part of that. And to think about them getting 3 in a row, I've never been to Lexington, Nick, but that was always a trip that you just knew Florida was going to win. And then about the last 5-6 years, man, these games have been a lot closer. Obviously they came to the Swamp in 2018 and got that victory, but they could have won several others, like you've mentioned. And I kind of put this, and again, I classify all these as must wins. In no way as it relates to Napier's job security, but just
watch out. I had dealt with that all Tennessee week. People just could not understand.
Yeah, it's just in terms of fan buy-in, player buy-in, recruiting momentum, all of that. There's some games that you just have to win, especially when you know that there's some on the schedule that might be else. There's some others along the way that you got to get done, and this is one of them to me. And because I if anything, Nick, I put the next 3 I put as must-win games. If we're being honest, I had the next 3: Kentucky, Vanderbilt, and South Carolina. That being said, I think Florida fans could stomach a loss at South Carolina if the Gators win the next 2, avenge the loss to Vanderbilt, avenge the last 2 to Kentucky, and get to 5-1. Now, they win at South Carolina, then they're 6-1. But I'm getting ahead of myself. They got to win at Lexington first, and to me, it's going to be no easy task. There's a lot of storylines to follow this week, which we'll get into. But before we do that, Nick, how are you feeling about this team? I know you had a video earlier this week on our Gators Online channel, just kind of looking at taking stock through the first 4 games. But how do you feel about this team coming off the Charlotte matchup and kind of what you saw from all 3 faces?
I'd like to just ignore special teams.
Hey, now they found their kicker.
You got nothing nice to say.
You got nothing nice to say about Trey Smack?
No, but why did it take this? What was Trey Smack doing in practice to not be okay?
Well, he's done it in the game now. Special teams player of the week, Nick.
I think
SEC wanted to talk about it.
This is just I think it's very normal for fans to ride this roller coaster. And when I picked Florida to beat Tennessee, they were like, "Oh my God, Nick's being so positive." And then they beat Tennessee, and I think they just didn't hear that. I was like, "I don't think Tennessee's very good, and I think Joe Milton stinks." So I'm going to pick Florida this week. And then you beat Tennessee, which was a big win, a huge win. You had to have it. But then when Florida goes out and looks the way they do against Charlotte, now it's like, hey, we might have to fire Billy. And that's just kind of the roller coaster of being a fan, and I get that. But I'm just still here in the middle. I'm yeah, Florida is still a team that's young, trying to learn how to win. And if they don't bring their A game, if they don't play to their capabilities, they're going to have games like that. If Florida goes out this week and has procedural issues like they had against Utah, they'll lose to Kentucky. They're not good enough to overcome stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I didn't leave the Charlotte game thinking, "Oh man, this team really stinks." I left the Charlotte game being they didn't come to play today, and that's what happens if they don't bring their absolute best game, because that's where the margin of error is for this team right now.
It is, and the one thing that you can say is really since that first play against Utah, man, that defense has been showing up. Every single
since the second play against Utah.
Yeah, since the second play. every quarter. I mean, every series, they're probably in every game. There's obviously one drive that they give up against Charlotte, but really weren't many times that they even sniffed UF territory. And they got 4 sacks in the game, which I thought was key. Didn't get any turnovers, but they obviously got some stops, and they did a good job. And when Florida's offense was struggling to score in the red zone, I think part of Billy's saying, okay, let's just kick the field goals was how his defense was playing. He might have been, I think last year might have had to be a little bit more aggressive down there and go for it on some of those 4th downs. But again, the silver lining and all that was that I think there's no question now who you're sending out there to kick field goals. And I think that was important because where Florida's coming up in SEC play, there might be a game that comes down to a kick. And if they didn't have that established, I think that could have been problematic. Now, again, Trey's got to keep it up and show some consistency, but he looked good against Charlotte.
Listen, I mean, Billy's catching a bunch of heat because he's saying like special teams are really good or took a step forward. Like Trey Smack's been sensational in kickoffs. At 22 of his 24 kicks have gone for touchbacks. He's perfect on the year for PATs and field goals. Jeremy Crawshaw, when he isn't shanking one off the side of his foot, has been fine.
I know, heard you say that.
Florida blocked a punt last week, and just like unluckily, the ball still rolls 40 yards. Like Derek Wingo gets 4 fingers on a football, and it still rolls 40 yards. Like that's just unlucky. There's absolutely no excuse that every single game you're trotting 10 guys out there.
Well, and then they had a punt return that got negated.
Oh yeah.
Although if that penalty had not been negated, or if that play had not been negated,
47 yards,
we don't see the one-handed catch.
Yeah, it's just like I don't know that you need a dedicated special teams coach. I think you just need a different guy running special teams because they've through how many games now? 4 this year and through 17, 18 games. Like special teams have just been bad.
Yeah, and it's
for as long as they've been here.
At this point, like to have 10 guys on the field like that just cannot happen again. Has it been every game? Every single game.
Yeah. But Florida's good enough. They don't need to play with 11. They'll just play with 10 on special teams, and that's fine.
No, they're not. That's not where you want to be. So look, we'll get into a lot more of that. We'll also get into the news of this week. Florida getting some starters back, injury reports, some of the players that we got to talk to. We'll jump into all that. But right now we're going to get to this ad read, and then we're going to bring in Nick to talk some Wildcats. And if you are checking out Nick, that is that Bird Dogs hat that he is able to rock every week, and I'm jealous of because I wish that it could fit my huge head.
Oddly shapen head.
Yes, but that's all right because it will likely fit your head well. And if you also want to check out some other things, they've got I can rock the polo at least. So the polo is a go, and also got the khakis as well. And if you go to birddogs.com and use the promo code Gators, you can get a free Hydro Flask style water bottle with your purchase. And that is the hat, the polo, the khaki shorts. They got a bunch of great stuff on their site. The pants as well. Nick is a huge fan of. They do the exact same thing as Lululemon, but fit way better than regular shorts that are made of stiff, restricting cotton. Bird Dogs fixed this issue by inventing cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki but stretches so you get a way slimmer fit without having to sacrifice movement. So go to birddogs.com/Gators. Use that promo code to get a free Hydro Flask style water bottle with your purchase. And with that, we're going to bring in Nick. How's it going, my friend?
I got my Bird Dogs hat on too.
Yeah.
perfect synergy between Knicks today.
I'm just jealous.
Speaking of jealous, great segue there, Zach. Big day in the state of Kentucky today as sports gambling comes to the state. Might be wagering myself. Just what's this been like? We have a ongoing legal battle here with like Hard Rock. Hard Rock had an app that we were betting on for like a week, and then somebody sued them, and that was 4 years ago. So we're trying to get it back here, but big time in Kentucky today.
Oh, it really is, and it's felt like a long time coming too, because we are surrounded by states. Like we were sports gambling desert. Now we've reached the oasis. I used to drive across the bridge to Indiana to have to place my bets. Now I can do it from my phone.
Wow.
So that's awesome. We're rocking with FanDuel like everybody else at On3. The exciting part too, live gambling. Never done that before. That's going to be,
oh, buddy.
Yeah, that's going to be great.
So we did my bachelor party in Nashville, who had just Tennessee had just legalized gambling, and we went for the first Friday and Saturday of March Madness, and it was just we're gambling halves, we're gambling props, we're doing live second halves. Oh, it was a thing of beauty.
Oh man, and especially with college basketball too. Like, you know, we love it here, but I can't. The lines come out late. Like, it's so much easier just to have it on our phone. So we're fired up, ready for a big weekend. And they did it before a big game, Kentucky, Florida.
Yeah.
What was once all right, let's go outside and pick a switch to get our asses whipped with. Now this is a game, a bona fide game that, you know, I feel like some of these guys are going to feel like they got beat up with some switches because it feels like this is going to be a real physical matchup Saturday at Kroger Field.
What do you feel like is the state of this series, Nick? And, you know, for so long, obviously, it was let's end the streak. Now they've, you know, had Florida's hand the last 5 years, and obviously the last 2 years, back-to-back wins. Is it let's sustain this? Is it, you know, we've got the monkey off our back? Is it like how do they talk about this, or what are some of the talking points among the fan base as well?
Well, it really was a get the monkey off our back sort of situation, because before that game, I mean, you had the close call where Kentucky didn't cover the receivers in 2017, and then they had a holding penalty to get them out of field goal range. And then a couple years before, down in the swamp, they were in overtime. Boom Williams scores a touchdown. And then there's
triple overtime game, right?
It was crazy. And then there's a delay of game that's not called that Kentucky fans were yelling and kicking and screaming over. So it was always close, but Kentucky really didn't reach new heights until they could get past this Florida streak, because it just weighed so heavily on the players. And then the first year they do that, they go out and win 9 games. The game in 2021, same thing happens where they beat Florida. The next week LSU comes to town and they dog walk them and go on to win 9 regular season games that season. So it kind of reminds me of the old Louisville series where the late, great Gerald Lorenzen, R.I.P., he used to say, you know, you couldn't have a great season unless you beat Louisville in the opener. And it kind of feels the same way with Florida now. Like, it's hard to have a great sort of season that you hang your bird dog's hat on unless you're able to beat Florida, because it opens up the possibilities for great things to happen. You know, like I don't think any Kentucky fans are going to predict a massive upset over Georgia unless they beat Florida, right? So, hell, in the preseason, a lot of fans were even writing this in as a win. So some of it's might be a little overconfident. I'm not that overconfident, but I certainly think Kentucky has enough guns, big enough guns, to be able to compete against Florida Saturday and get a win at Kroger Field.
We were talking a little bit about that. I think there's a segment of Florida fans who still, like, the schedule comes out in July and they just, like, in their mind, Sharpie a W next to Kentucky because, you know, that's just what they know. And then I think there's a segment of fans who, especially after the way Florida looked against Charlotte, are like, oh, no, not again. Can't lose Kentucky 3 times. What's the mentality of the Kentucky fan base? Are there still some people that are, like, shell-shocked and, like, we'll find a way to lose to Florida, or is there like confidence? Like, hey, this is another year. We're going to win 3 in a row, which hasn't happened since the great Bear Bryant. was strolling the sidelines for
Yeah, I mean, Stoops would be in Bear Bryant territory.
Yeah, and he's passed him for overall wins last year, but that is one of Stoops' greatest achievements as a coach. When bad things happen, people don't immediately say, well, here we go again. But in the present, in the current, if you ask national people about this game, they're like, well, we don't really know about Kentucky. And that's because in their 4-0 start, they haven't been a clean football team. You know, we're talking about the 10 guys on the field. The problems haven't been that striking for Kentucky, but they kind of have. There was 2 bad snaps 2 weeks ago that put him behind the 8 ball. Last week, Leary drops a snap, then he gets stepped on. The drops have been a problem. So they've had a ton of explosive plays that kind of make up for those mistakes. Mm-hmm. But yet, Kentucky's the second most penalized team in the Southeastern Conference, committing about 8 a game, and they haven't been complete backbreakers. But I think Kentucky fans are, while they're excited for this game against Florida on Saturday, there isn't the Vince McMahon we're walking in and kicking their tails in, because Kentucky has not played a perfect game offensively.
I see.
Cautious optimism.
Yes.
No doubt. And obviously transfer heavy in their backfield with their quarterback and running back, and a lot of portal work that we've seen Stoops do with this roster. But specifically Devin Leary and Ray Davis, what have you seen from those guys? What have they done kind of leading the charge there for the Wildcats on offense?
Davis was one of the biggest surprises, because when Kentucky got him, there was this narrative that he was a between the tackles, just like he'll get 3 or 4 yards. But he's turned out to be a big playmaker. Against Akron, he became the first player ever to have a 50-yard receiving and 50-yard rushing touchdown in the same game. And that's the part of this where they got a couple other portal guys where you thought, oh, well, they'll use those guys on third down because they're good receivers. And turns out Davis is very dynamic as a pass catcher. He's been a pleasant surprise. Now, down to down, there's going to be some no gains, right? And I think that's the thing where Florida fans got to be tricky, because you can be stopping the Kentucky run pretty consistently, and then they'll hit you for a big one. I believe they've got 5 plays of 30 yards or more this year. They've been very explosive both in the running and in the passing game. And Leary, he's similarly that's a mouthful there. He's been perplexing at times too, because he was built as this very accurate passer. Like, he's going to put the ball on the dime. But I think he's got 5 picks, and he's only completing 59% of his passes. Some of that is the drops. He's got one of the higher drop rates among any quarterbacks in the SEC. But there's been sometimes where he's throwing it, and you're like, what's he doing there? And I think some of those struggles are because Liam Cohen is asking him to make a lot more difficult throws than what he had to make at NC State, where that was spread out, tempo, let's get the ball out of your hand quick, let's go fast. They're dropping him back. His average depth of target is over 11 yards. So wow. They're creating explosive plays, and it's very purposeful, and it's cause for some inaccuracies. And the question is like, can Florida take advantage of it? Because there was one play, you can't throw a dig across the middle. You can't sail it, right? He sailed one against Vanderbilt, and the dude fell down before he could get to it. So there could be some opportunities for Florida to create some turnovers if Leary has some of those doy-doy moments in the pocket.
That's one for me, because Florida, Austin Armstrong, we were told a ton, like, hey, he's going to get after the quarterback. He will use 13 men on the field and blitz all 13 of them. They want to affect the quarterback. And with that, you would expect turnovers. Florida has just one. It was a Joe Milton arm punt. It was like he was in the backyard playing 500 with his friends. It was
forced off of quarterback pressure, too.
It was. Well, Des Watson is a gigantic mountain of a man, so it's probably hard to see over him. So Florida hasn't really created turnovers. They have a -3 turnover margin on the year. Only have the one interception. Fumbles are weird. Fumble luck is weird, but I wonder if Florida can get pressure with just 4 and then create tighter windows for Devin Leary, or do they need to commit, like against Tennessee, because Joe Milton's a runner or can run? They had to commit a guy into the box, and now you're playing man on man, which then led to some big pass receptions. But it's probably been weird as a Kentucky guy to watch this offense. This is not an offense at Kentucky that you're used to seeing, where it's like, hey, we are going to try to physically impose our will with an offensive line and run the ball, and we'll hit some passes here and there. It's like you're watching Kentucky, and it's like 3 and out, 70 yards.
It
third and 10, 65-yard touchdown. You're just like, what is happening?
It has been weird, and it was also weird looking at the Florida stats. Like, they haven't created a bunch of sacks or tackle for loss either. But I do think Florida, the one thing they do well is Coach Chaos, which I love that nickname. It's funny, Sean Spencer actually was on the coaching staff at UMass when Liam Cohen was the quarterback back in the day. That's a funny little connection there. But their ability to confuse offensive lines with a lot of movement. I mean, that's Kentucky's biggest struggle, period, offensively, is handling studs, handling movement. But with that being said, Devin Leary is not running the ball down the field like Joe Milton, like Will Levis did, like Anthony Richardson did. But he is very good at extending plays, leaking out, and then keeping his eyes downfield. That big Ray Davis touchdown 2 weeks ago, he like dodged 3 guys, had one hanging on him, dumped it off, and it turns into an explosive play. So I would imagine they're going to be able to put some pressure on Devin Leary, but he is a lot harder to take down than you might think for being a smaller guy. So really it comes down to, I think a lot of it is what this game comes down to is how effectively do they get pressure on Leary, or is he still able to see through the pressure, see through that 4-man rush and get the ball downfield?
You know, it's interesting that you mentioned about Leary's accuracy issues and his reputation coming in, because it's been the opposite for Mertz. He came in as a reputation as being an inaccurate passer, and he leads the SEC in completion percentage.
I think he came in with a reputation of being very generous, giving the ball to his receivers, the other defensive backs, linebackers. If you were on the field, you might get a ball from Graham Mertz.
And this is just a subplot, I guess, with this matchup.
Oh, it is.
Nick. But you know, both of these guys visited Kentucky. How much was Mertz in the mix there from what you remember, and how do you feel like that plays into this matchup with these two getting faced with each other in this quarterback duel?
I was breaking down Graham Mertz film, trying to formulate my talking points on how to sell a fan base on Graham Mertz, because he did have, I mean, at Wisconsin he had his moments of good.
I mean, his Northwestern game last year he went off. Yeah,
and he was hamstrung by a terrible play caller, scheme, everything. So like he had that going for him. It was just when they asked him to do a lot, he couldn't. And Florida right now is not asking him to do a lot. He's got a competent running game. Trevor Etienne can bust big plays, and they're able to get the ball out of his hands without facing a lot of pressure in the short and intermediate passing game, and it's worked well. Yeah. And I think if you're a Kentucky fan, the front seven is very good. It's the strength of the team, and they've been able to get pressure without just like a Josh Allen like doing it all, right? Like Deion Walker is a very big, enormous nose guard who had his coming out party blowing up at TFL last year at Florida. He only has 1 sack, but A.J. Swan was seeing ghosts. Like if that guy got close, he was just getting rid of the ball.
Sure.
I want to say that 5 different guys have sacks for Kentucky so far this fall. So they're spreading the wealth, and I think they can get pressure on Mertz. It's just all about how much what are the down and distance on third down, right? Like, can you force into obvious passing situations where Mertz has to make a play? Because Kentucky has not faced a rushing attack like this. Even their FCS teams, it was all guys that schemes that were wide open. We're going to throw it all around the yard. So is Kentucky able to just eat some of those runs up to make Mertz have to throw to beat you? Because I know Brad White, in his mind, the more Graham Mertz has to throw it, the better. I want to say he's like 0-11 in his career in games where he has to throw the ball 30-plus times. Yep. So, like, try to make Graham Mertz beat you, I think, is the game plan for Kentucky this week.
Great stuff.
That's too. I was telling Zach or anyone around me in the press box, Florida's just not built to come back from like they're not built to come back and come back from a deficit. And they've lost 3 of 4 coin flips, and the other team deferred every time. I'm like, no, just take the ball and score right away.
Right,
Make Floyd
right.
come from behind. I don't know that Graham Mertz can't win you a game with his arm, but we certainly haven't seen it yet. And I don't know that I'd be confident if Kentucky's up 10-14 in the third quarter on Saturday, thinking, okay, Graham Mertz, they're going to have to throw now, and Graham Mertz will get the job done. Also, it's just like I don't know that Florida can afford to get into that kind of thing. So I think you'll see Florida try to lean on that running game early, and I think Kentucky's only giving up 77 yards, but like you said, this is a whole different test. And I think I'm coming into this week, going into the Tennessee game, I was like, I don't know that Tennessee's any good. Like Virginia apparently is terrible. And then they played James Madison. I was like, I don't know who, but Tennessee fans were telling me like nobody runs on us. And I was like, okay. Well, then Florida ran for 183. So it'll be interesting to me. I think Florida has to run the ball. I don't care that the game's at noon. I trust the good people of Kentucky to listen to Mark Stoops, wake up, have that 7 a.m. shower beer, and get to Kroger Field. It'll be Zach's first time. I really enjoy Kroger Field. It's a little bit smaller, but it gets loud. And I'm interested to see if the blue and the white works this week.
Yeah, we're not the best at wearing the right color T-shirts when they try to do this thing, but they are opening the tailgate lots an hour early at 7 a.m. to let people get well lubricated for this game. One thing I'm getting ready to write up on KentuckySportsRadio.com. I was looking at what are the characteristics, right? Like when Kentucky beats Florida, what do these games look like? They're all low scoring. I don't know if anybody's had more than a 10-point advantage in any one of those 3 games. They've been low-scoring affairs, and Kentucky has capitalized off Florida mistakes with defensive touchdowns, with special teams touchdowns. So, like, a lot of it's going to come down to who can avoid the catastrophic mistake. Yeah. So far, Florida has been good about taking care of the ball, even if they don't have everybody on the field for special teams. Kentucky's made some of those. But on the other hand, I mean, they did have a couple of pick sixes last week. So I'm fascinated by all this. And one other thing I wanted to mention, too, about the Kentucky defense going against the Florida run is that their Mike linebacker, De'Aaron Jackson, D-Jack, he's a run stuffer through and through. But their dynamic athlete, Trevin Wallace, he was a top 50 player. Auburn fires Gus Malzahn 2 days before signing day because they're Auburn and they're idiots. That's what they do. So Trevin Wallace kind of fell into their lap. He was the guy that had the return touchdown against Florida 2 years ago. He leads the team in sacks now. He's their leading tackler. He is outstanding as a delayed blitzer working in space, but he's a little undisciplined in run fits. And that's where I kind of worry, like, hey, if he can get a little over aggressive, that's where you can pop one of those chunk run plays. So like that's something to certainly keep an eye on Saturday.
And then I want to ask you a couple of things, Nick, about the receivers on both sides. First of all, what do you think of Kentucky's wideouts so far? How much of a challenge could that be for Florida to defend those guys? And then on the flip side, the Gators get Eugene Wilson back. How do you anticipate Stoops trying to kind of corral him, because they use him in all kinds of different ways? They showed the Wildcat, I think, in his last game, but he does the reverses and the whole nine.
The one big question mark going into this season, Kentucky had replaced 2 starting cornerbacks, and I was a little bit just like, I don't know if this is going to work. But Max Hairston, I mean, his pick sixes weren't even his most impressive plays. I think he had 3 pass breakups in that last game, and he's been very aggressive in the open field. Like, for a little guy, he's very strong at the point of contact when the ball's getting in there. And also, I mean, he's their second leading tackler right now. So defending the pass, I'm more confident with. They've been pretty good tackling in the open field, especially after kind of a rocky start, which you probably expect during the season.
Sure.
From the offensive side, Kentucky does have a good, like, you can't really, like in this game, a lot of fans are like, well, just shut down Ricky Pearsall. That's what you're doing. It's hard to really key on one guy. Barryon Brown will kind of be used similarly, where they let him kind of run around and do a bunch of different stuff. Like, just let the fast guy run in open space. Dane Key, he had a couple bad drops early, and he got personally challenged, and he gets a big touchdown last week. The one who's been sneaky good is Tavion Robinson. The only problem, the only hang-up with him, their slot receiver, most of his production at Kentucky has just been against bad teams. How does he do against Power 5 SEC opponents, right? Like, that's the ultimate question, because he has been the most reliable pass catcher so far this year for Kentucky. When they've needed a big play, they've gone to him. He's been sure-handed, and probably Devin Leary's best highlights, his best passes, have all been just hitting Tavion Robinson where he was supposed to be, when he was supposed to be, and could turn around and make the catch. So he's been pretty consistent. He's the guy who, I'm placing my prop bets, and over receiving yards for Tavion Robinson is going to be one of them.
What do you think? What does it look like? You mentioned the games Kentucky has won have been low scoring. Neither of these teams have any interest in moving faster than a snail on offense, which would lend it to it's an ESPN game, so they're definitely selling commercials. Shout out to Chip Kelly. It might not be under 3 hours, but does that lend itself to Kentucky if they don't turn the ball over? What does a Kentucky win look like, and what would a Florida win look like? What has to happen for each?
I think the Florida win is staying ahead of those chains and turning those scoring opportunities into touchdowns, because we saw them kick a bunch of field goals last weekend, and Kentucky hasn't been great on third down, but they have really bowed up when it comes time to getting stops, to forcing field goals. That they have been good in the red zone. So I think for Florida, it's capitalizing
They've
on
been
red
really
zone.
good in the red zone, actually.
Yeah. So if Florida can capitalize in the red zone, that's going to worry me as a Kentucky fan, and then just take advantage of those doy moments that Kentucky has offensively, because they're going to happen. It's just inevitable. Like, a lot of people, I think, were like,
Nick, we're only 4 games in, and you're writing like in stone, Kentucky will stub its toe at some point during a football game.
Yeah, I mean, because like part of it is, well, they're going to get over the hump eventually, but like at some point you are who you are, right? Like so I think that's who they are, but they're also very explosive. So for me, a Kentucky win is getting multiple big chunk plays, and some of them turn into touchdowns. Wandale Robinson had a 40-yard touchdown. Lynn Bowden had a big touchdown. Dane Key had a big touchdown, and all of those big wins. So getting one or two of those and actually being able to run the football, because I think Kentucky is going to try to take a lead early and then say, all right, Florida, you want to limit possessions? Well, we can do that too. We can run the football as well, and then have some chunk plays. So I think that's kind of the recipe, because if you do get a lead, and they want to force Graham Mertz to beat.
Yeah,
that's
the recipe. That's the book. I think Utah showed it, and that's why I was worried about after the Utah game was, all right, well, there you go. There's the blueprint to beat Florida, and you got 11 more games. So I think that's something that's interesting for me. Austin Armstrong. This is why I think they'll try to get pressure with 4. Austin Armstrong, if you go back and look at his Southern Miss defenses, very susceptible to the big play, because they were bringing guys, playing single high safeties. And then when I look at Kentucky's offense, I'm like, you can't go into the game with that same Tennessee game plan and thinking like, hey, listen, if Joe Milton beats us with his arm, that's cool. Like, hey, Devin Leary will beat you with his arm. Let's not make that the game plan. Let's not make that the game plan.
I do think too that the "you are what you are" sentiment I shared. I don't think we've seen the best version of Devin Leary, and part of that is just playing football. He hadn't played in a while, right? Coming off that injury.
Yeah, that's right.
And also playing a different style where he's not going tempo, no huddle, not thinking a lot. I think some of it is thinking a little bit too much. But if you go back and you look at some of his big games where he's facing the top 25 teams, I want to say he was 7-0 at home at NC State and had like 1 pick and 15 interceptions, or the other way around, 15 touchdowns and 1 interception. So he's played big in big moments. They got a big upset over Clemson a couple of years ago. Right. So I think part of this is waiting for him to have his moment, and it could come Saturday against Florida.
Now, a couple questions before we let you go, Nick, because we were talking about this before you came on. Would Kentucky fans rush the field if they beat Florida?
I don't think so. I think
The
field rushing
for Florida fans. It was really cool in 21 though.
Yeah, and it's a lot of fun to rush the field. I've done it a couple of times as a fan.
Have they done it since then?
They have not, and I think that's part of it. Is like, when Kentucky beat Spurrier for the first time, I was a drunk freshman at UK, and it was like Randall Cobb scores the touchdown, and we were ready to dance on Spurrier's grave, right? Like we had to exercise that demon. They did that. And since then, there hasn't. It was the Florida game, right? That was the big monkey off their back.
Yeah,
but
1986,
I think now it really is like the last big hurdle is beating Georgia. That's the one that Stoops. He came close back in 2016 in Kirby's first year, and then they've covered. They've done a good job covering against the Dogs, but they haven't gotten that win. So I do ultimately think that that's really the only game that they would probably deem worth storming the field over now.
Where's that going?
They say good teams win, great teams cover.
They do, but they're actually going to Georgia next week. So, you know what? I don't think
not rushing Sanford.
I don't think fans would be mad either if like, oh no, we can't rush the field, but we beat Georgia. Like,
well, that's how it happened with Florida too. The first win was at Ben Hill Griffin, and then I think Dan got a couple more wins in that series. It was so funny though because that was. You had to ask the question as like a member of the media, and these kids were, their parents didn't even think about having kids. We're asking an 18-year-old, hey, if you haven't beaten Florida in 30 years, and Dan Mullen that Monday said, well, the streak has to end sometime. 5 days later, and we're like, you idiot, what are you saying?
You downplayed it. Nick, final thing for you, recommendations in Lexington for me. I already know where I'm going to get pizza, I think.
Okay.
Well, first, Goodfellas, overrated, underrated, justly rated.
Goodfellas is the perfect end of night. It's the best like slice at 1 a.m. and there's usually like a line, but it's not that long and it's worth it. That would be so if you're going to go out Friday, you're probably going to want to go out Saturday night. It's going to be early morning Friday night. But Saturday they have the Pavilion downtown. Centro is like I don't feel very old there, and it's open air. It's really nice. Goodfellas is right around the corner. But quick funny story: last time it was the 19 game, Kyle Trask coming out party. The night before, I was with some friends. We had a good time. We didn't get too rowdy, but we were waiting in line at Goodfellas for our pizza to end the night. And long story short, a guy he got called a creep because he was trying to take a picture of a girl who didn't want to take her picture taken. She throws his phone. They're get the hell out of here. So we're trying to be like, I'm 6'6", 240, right? I'm a big guy. We're just like, dude, what the hell? Get out of here. He comes up and punches me square in the nose. And I'm 28 at the time. I'm not used to getting punched in the face. Like, this ain't college anymore. Well, the dude, he should have known the little guy was a much better fighter. My buddy, like, headlock, wails on him, throws him against a car. It was a whole scene. So I don't think you'll get punched in the face if you wait in line at Goodfellas, Zach. That was a very rare occurrence, even though it was hilarious. But KS Bar is our local establishment that's close to the stadium. Great wings. We smoke them in like 12 hours. They're spectacular. I would also say that if you wanted to do an early, I think they'll be open for breakfast. But the local taco is it's near the college bars. They do a brunch, and it's $3 tacos and $1 mimosas. Maybe if your flight doesn't leave till late Sunday, that place rocks. So Lexington, for a small town, has a great food scene. So if you're thinking on anything else, like you want to go steak or at Tony's or something, or Jeff Ruby's is the fancy place that everybody goes. That's where Mark Stoops takes all the recruits for the pricey steaks. That's if you want to go high dollar, where the real wheeler and dealers go.
Where do you go for your steak?
I don't do the fancy steaks. I got to go to a place with more affordable cocktails. We're drinking some of our food. And if McCarthy's downtown, that's the other, like, you feel good. Like, it's it's a great people watching place. All ages, right? You don't have to worry about feeling too old, because that's the worst part about going back to my old college town, right? Is you're like, gosh, these kids are children. Like I'm the old guy now, the creepy old guy in the corner. You don't want to be that.
Yeah, my friend opened a bar here, and it's in Midtown, right in the college area. So it's in a prime location. So I went and supported him while he was opening it. And by the time 11 o'clock rolls around, looking around, I'm like, I'm way too old to be here.
I got to get out.
Well, listen, we're glad that we got you in here, Nick, and you can get out now. Great perspective on the Wildcats. We're looking forward to.
You can gamble. Where will you be wagering your money on your phone this week?
Oh, I'm gonna be taking. I hate that everybody's kind of jumped on this, but I am going to be taking the under in this game. I think it's going to still be a low-scoring affair, and I can't really see a scenario where Florida blows out Kentucky. I can see a scenario where Florida wins by a touchdown. I can see one where Kentucky wins by a touchdown. I could see one where Kentucky kind of, opens things up and wins, but they still stop Graham Mertz. So that's why I'm going to ultimately take the under. Maybe the Cats to cover as well. It's a fun principle play whenever there's an unranked team favored over a ranked team. It's like betting against Matt Campbell when the spread's within 4 points. Like, you just got to bet against him, even if it goes against you last week. The week before it didn't. So principal plays, Iowa unders. That's another great principal play. That one is certainly live this weekend too.
What is the under? Like, how do you even make it an under for Iowa? It has to be in the 30s.
And it's against, I want to say, Northwestern or Illinois. I mean, neither team is going to be able to score. Yeah, 36.5. And it's like, even then, you're like, man, that feels like too many points.
Nick, we appreciate it, man. Thanks for the time. Hopefully we'll run into you on Saturday.
Yeah.
And we'll definitely take you up on those recommendations too, bud.
Safe travels, and we'll see you up in Lexington soon.
All
See
right.
you, Nick. Thank you, bud.
Nick Roush from KSR joined us. Definitely appreciate his time and perspective on the new look Kentucky team. A lot of transfers featured on their starting lineup and roster, just like Florida, Nick.
Yeah, and the one that he mentioned, Deion Walker, 6'6", 348 pounds. He plays nose tackle. They'll throw him at defensive end too. He's like
he's a beast,
kind of like a Dez Watson, like a big boy, but moves better, or moves surprisingly well for how big he is. To me, I when I look at this game, like, we don't really know Kentucky, and I don't know that. I could see Florida blowing Kentucky out just because Kentucky's been so turnover prone, and if you can turn those into touchdowns, then maybe. But who knows what happens when Florida gets in that red area, Zach?
Yeah, it's that's definitely going to be one of the keys to the game, which we'll get into. Before we do that, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, My Perfect Franchise. If you're ready to leave the corporate rat race for the American dream, looking for a side hustle while working your current job, wanting to diversify, build wealth, and or leave a legacy, Andy can help. Andy is a franchise consultant as well as a franchise owner and helps people find franchises that fit their skill sets, financial requirements, time to commit, and more. His services are 100% free, and he's here to help if you have any questions about business ownership. You can learn more and contact Andy anytime at myperfectfranchise.net or calling or texting him at 404-973-9901. And also want to get to another one of our sponsors before we get into this final segment, and that is Prairie Dental Center. The doctor is a UF grad who's practiced in Gainesville for 3 decades and has developed a deep understanding of how to diagnose and treat various dental problems. If you're having dental concerns or just need a cleaning, go to Prairie Dental Center, which offers a wide range of personalized care options to meet your individual need. You can give their office a call at 352-373-3431. Tell them Gators Online sent you, and your new patient exam will be free. Nick mentioned the red zone issues. That was obviously the bugaboo for the Gators against Charlotte. 4 field goals in the red zone that they had to kick. They actually still finish 100% in the red zone because they got all those field goals, and they've now scored on 89% of their red zone trips. But they've only scored touchdowns now just 57% of the time, 57.9. And that's 12th in the SEC and 80th nationally. That's not good enough. Definitely Florida's got to be able to find the end zone against Kentucky. And as Nick mentioned, they've done really well defending in the red zone. They rank 4th in the SEC, 42nd nationally. They've only given up 7 touchdowns and 13 red zone trips that they've had. So they've done a good job of kind of defending their end zone once offenses get down there. And Nick, I'm sure that was a point of emphasis in practice this week. Billy said that they had a better practice week than they did against Charlotte, or didn't say that specifically, but obviously it's what it sounds like. Said that Wednesday was their sharpest practice of the week. Mm-hmm. But I imagine that he paid particular attention to the red zone work this week because they just could not get it done. There was one play. I don't know if it was a third down, but man, there was one play where they handed off to Montrell Johnson, and he just had a wide open hole and tripped and fell. And it was that kind of night for Florida in the red zone.
There was one pass. I can't remember the route. It almost looked like a wheel route where Graham Mertz was just like 3 ticks too late to Ricky Pearsall on the sideline. I think they were like at like 18. And the defensive back getting over to Ricky was late. And it's just like, if you would have seen it right away, Ricky's got a head full of steam. Instead, he catches it. And now he's up against the sideline and it goes for like a 2-yard gain. I know the fans would love to say like play calling stinks and that's what it is. And it's probably, it's like they say, Zach, things are never as bad as you think they are, and they're never as good as you think they are. So there's probably a mix of play calling and execution. And then listen, the guys on the other side of the field also are on scholarship and make some plays sometimes too. But you have to get those turn those red zone attempts into 7 and not 3. Great that you're scoring when you're down there. I think.
Yeah, I mean 90% of the time.
When I look at Billy's like bad red zone scoring percentages, I'm thinking, well, he went for it a lot on 4th down, and like if you don't get it on 4th down, now you got to the red zone and didn't score.
Yeah.
But
it was interesting. You mentioned that, Nick. He said after the game, like, because he got asked, why didn't you go for it down there? You're so aggressive on 4th down. It's like the analytics said, he goes, and this was a moment where I had to go with what the analytics said, where as much as I didn't want to. So that was interesting. But again, I think some of that also had to do with how the defense is playing. If your defense is giving up a bunch of points and yards like it was last year, you're going for it more often.
Yeah.
And I think once he got Trey Smack going, he was like, well, let's keep this thing rolling. Don't know what it's like to have field goals go through yet this season.
It to me, I think my key to the game isn't red zone. My key to the game is going to be, you were terrible on the road last year. 1-5 away from home, 0-3 in true road games, 0-2 in neutral site games.
And what do you remember about that A&M game too?
A&M was missing everybody. A&M was missing like 35 guys.
I don't know if it was that, but it was a lot.
I got a list from Texags, tweeted it, and it had like 9 million impressions. The tweet went off. They were missing a ton of people. They had like injuries, and then there was like a flu bug that went through the team. So they had a ton of guys that weren't playing. So you beat a 5-win Texas A&M team. That's your only road win. Florida's not good enough to go on the road to Kentucky, play the way they did at Utah, and still and beat Kentucky. They won't. They can't beat themselves and beat Kentucky. So for me, procedurally, how do you handle that? There's no track record right now to give me confidence that you're going to go out this Saturday and play sound football. We just haven't seen it. So that's a huge key for me, more so than scoring touchdowns over field goals in the red zone. How many false starts do you have? if we're talking about Florida has to stay, like Billy says, on schedule ahead of the sticks, well, you can't have a holding on a 1st and 10. You can't have a false start on 3rd and 1 to make it now 3rd and 6. So just those little things that are so preventable, just playing sound football, I think is where you have to start this week for Florida on the road.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And I think that, another key to this matchup that when you look at it is, Nick mentioned this as well, the success that they've had. And again, takeaways. Maxwell Harrison, he was the SEC Defensive Player of the Week last year. He got a bunch of national awards because he had 2 pick sixes against Vanderbilt. And he's got 3 of Kentucky's 4 interceptions. And, they lead the league, and they got 4 fumble recoveries. They lead the league with 8 total takeaways. That's just a Mark Stoops staple. And, the Gators, they haven't gotten a lot of takeaways on defense, but they had done a pretty good job taking care of the ball up until the last game. They had 2 fumbles in the 3rd quarter that basically allowed Charlotte to hang around.
Mm-hmm.
And, Nick mentioned it, -3 turnover margin. That's 12th in the SEC, 105th nationally. Graham Mertz has only thrown 1 interception, and it's, it basically went through Ricky's hands. So they haven't had a lot of issues there, and he's been very accurate, but they got to take care of the ball in this game. I mean, they got to win the turnover battle, and they can't let Kentucky get some short fields.
Yeah, and another one that's interesting to me is Kentucky's defense doesn't change based on who they play. They kind of just run their stuff. And Kentucky, with Brad White, who's the defensive coordinator, and Mark Stoops, obviously defensive coach, they kind of just play like an umbrella, and they just try to keep everything in front of them, and then they swarm to the football. And when I think about that, I'm like, okay, well, Graham Mertz is great there. If you're going to give Graham Mertz 8 yards, let him pass from 0 to 8, Florida will nickel and dime you all day. So you really don't see Kentucky change who it is and what it does defensively, but I almost wonder if they change a little bit this week, because Florida hasn't shown that they can push the ball down the field with Graham, but they will go 6 yards, 5 yards, 7 yards, 3 yards. They're fine doing that. So that's something that's interesting to me. And I think getting Kingsley Aguakin back is going to be huge for Florida. If you look at and I don't think Jake Slaughter's played bad, but when you look at Florida and the way their offense is run, by far the best game they've had was Tennessee, and who was playing center. I also think you get Eugene Wilson back this week, and those jet sweeps, he's hit enough of them, and Florida forced them down Tennessee's throat before he got hurt.
Yeah, they did.
It's on tape. You have to respect that. And I think that not only is a play where Trey can go off, but I think it takes some pressure off of Ricky Pearsall. He's not the only guy people can key in on. And now if you're dragging linebackers,
as a decoy,
dragging people all around the field, now you're creating lanes in the running game as well. So I think getting Kingsley back is probably the biggest thing for Florida. But Trey Wilson's an X factor. And I think he opens up so much more of the offense for the Gators this Saturday.
I don't know if Florida wins this game without either one of those guys. Honestly, I mean, maybe they win without Eugene, but I think he could be the difference in them winning the game. And Kingsley, to your point about your key, Nick, and not having false starts and playing well on the road and just looking better as an offensive line, man, you had to have Kingsley back for this.
Mm-hmm.
This is only now the second time where this offensive line, the one that it intended to start the season with as its 5, this will only be the second time that they've played in a game together. Just the second time. They haven't had back-to-back weeks. So it's they haven't had a chance to really gel from one game to the next. They've had all these different starting lineups. And we all know what happened last time. Florida went to Lexington, and there's one guy that started on that offensive line that is still back, and still, and he was the guy that I think, was the reason for all those issues. And, a lot of it obviously had to do with what Florida was doing to snap the ball and Kingsley having issues hearing. And it was his first time starting on the road in a real road game. So whatever issues they had to work through to get him on a good snap count in a road environment, they hadn't done that yet. So it's kind of like it was like the perfect storm for Florida in that game, and they just couldn't figure it out on the sideline. Well, because I asked Billy
Jake Slaughter against Utah. Tough.
Yeah. So, but Billy said, hey, we went to Neyland Stadium last year. We went to a lot of these different road games and have a system that works for Kingsley. So to get him back, I'm sure he wants to go and redeem himself, and have a game where he doesn't have any issues or any snap. I mean, it was a bad performance. So I think that's key. And then, the final thing that I wrote about this week, Nick, and you mentioned it as well, is the pressure from Austin Armstrong's units at Southern Miss. That was kind of their staple. They were number 4 in the nation last year, had 44 sacks. This group's got a long way to go. They only got 7 on the season right now, which is 92nd nationally and second to last in the SEC. But they had 4 sacks last Saturday. So they had more last Saturday than they did in the first 3 games. Now, some of them obviously might have to do with the opponent, but they're going to need probably multiple sacks in this game, and it's not going to be easy against Kentucky. They actually are first in the SEC in sacks allowed. They've only allowed 4 this season. They've done a good job protecting Leary. They've got an all-SEC preseason pick, Eli Cox, on their line of scrimmage. He's been a SEC Offensive Lineman of the Week already this season. So, that's going to be something I'm watching for. Obviously, it'd be great for Florida to get a turnover. But at the very least, let's see them replicate that performance that they had against Charlotte, where they were getting after the quarterback. And Jalen Jones is not an easy guy to bring down either, and they did it.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to me. I had completely forgotten about Kingsley and that game a couple of years ago. There's just, I think, a lot of ways this can go, and kind of like I said against Tennessee, and I said when we were talking to Nick, like I didn't know what Tennessee was. Their fans were telling us that they were great, and I was like, well, you haven't played anyone. And I think we're just in a weird place where, because of Florida's first 4 games, we know a lot about Florida. Like, I think we know exactly who Florida is from seeing them play 4 games. And
yeah,
Kentucky paid for 3 wins and then got to start with Vanderbilt. Like, we're going to know a lot more about who Kentucky is on Saturday. And maybe they're good. Maybe Kentucky's really good, and they've had some bad games and some weird turnover luck and some weird drops. And we'll find out that Kentucky is the second best team in the SEC East on Saturday. But we just don't know that yet. You can't look at, playing the likes of Akron. Shout out to Lorenzo Lingard, had a 100-yard rushing game last week, former Gator. Maybe they're good. Maybe they'll show up and we'll be talking on Sunday like, dude, they stink. Kentucky stinks. Like, we just don't know because of who they've played and how they've looked in the games that they've played.
Yeah, it's to me, this is critical. I know the East is going away after this season, but I mean, it's if Kentucky wins this one, they basically go out as the division's end, having kind of surpassed Florida in the East. In my mind, you win 3 straight. I mean, that doesn't make Kentucky a better program football wise, but I mean, they have had Florida's hand, and to me, you're looking for progress in year 2, right, Nick? Like, Florida's not going to win the SEC championship. I don't think anybody expected that. You want to see progress. You want to see the win total improve. You want to see the defense improve. You want to see the offense have some areas where they get better and maybe sustain some of the success they had, i.e. the run game. But I think one thing that's important is also, getting some key wins. We talked about how important it was for Billy to get a win over a rival this season because of going winless last year, and now he's done that. And he beat Tennessee, and he did it in the Swamp, and he kept the winning streak going and all the great things. Well, I think two other ways that he can show progress and that this program is moving forward from how low it got is by beating Kentucky and beating Vanderbilt, two teams that they lost to last year were kind of sore spots on their season. So that's a way that you can show a sign of progress is by going out and getting a win like this. And to Nick's point, doing it on the road, another thing that you weren't able to do well in your first season. So we'll see, man. I'm looking forward to it. Let's run through some of these comments real quick and see what we got in here. Harrison says, Gators by 1 million.
Oh, just take the money line, Harrison, or take the point, or take the point they're giving you.
Let's see. M. Stafford says Florida's a stepping stone for Kentucky, and Kentucky should be a doormat for the Gators.
Used to be.
Yeah.
And that's not taking a shot at Florida. Like, Mark Stoops is a hell of a coach, and has built a really good program to a certain identity. They recruit to it, they develop to it, and they play to an identity, which is why I asked Nick today. I'm like, hey, this has got to be weird to watch this offense this year because, like, that's not what you've seen for the 11 years that Mark Stoops has been there. You're not, this big physical running football team, and you're one of the most explosive offenses in the country, who also turns the ball over a ton.
Chris says, obviously, Florida's getting the win. Tay writes, long as defense continues to shine and Billy runs the football and consistently gets ball in playmakers' hands by design, I love UF here in Lexington. Man, imagine a whole game, Nick, of that opening drive that we saw against Kentucky with the scripted plays to Trey Wilson. Oh, that would be fun to watch.
It'll be interesting. Like, collarbone, like a bone bruise, to me is just like, does he get tackled on that turf and go out on the first play? And if that's your game plan, if your game plan was that, like, where do we go from here? Shoot. And part of the reason why I think, we haven't done our picks yet, so I'll hold off on that.
Stay tuned Friday to Gators Online, folks. Trav says, I don't think UK has a chance to run the football. Well, the Gators have been elite on defense this year. Really good. Number 1 in the SEC, number 5 nationally. They are number 2 in the SEC with their rushing defense, second to only Kentucky. So 2 really good rushing defenses in this matchup. But I do think that
Kentucky's given up, 77 yards, 77 and a half, something like that. I like Florida to go over 100 this week.
And I also don't think that Kentucky has seen a defense anything like Florida's.
No, certainly not.
So
we're getting to this. It's not. I was joking with Andy Staples today on his show. I was like, we're getting into Muschamp territory here. We're like, I'm excited when the defense goes on the field, and then kind of just like, oh dang, the offense is back out there now. It's not that bad, We're not watching.
It's not. Hey man,
we're not watching Skyler Morningweg, Tyler Murphy. Like, there's playmakers. Like, Trey Wilson's exciting. Ricky Pearsall has the catch of the year, certainly. Catch of the decade,
and look, you got Trevor Etienne. It's fun to watch. Arliss Boardingham has showed up now at tight end. Like, Florida's moving the ball. They are just, they've had red zone issues and they've had offensive line issues. They've had changes in their lineup every single week, and I think that has contributed, namely Kingsley, to a lot of the problems. Now, not all of them. They have their issues and their limitations, like every offense, but they just need to put it together, and this is not going to be an easy matchup, an easy defensive coach, or an easy place to put it together. But they're going to have all the bullets in their gun, Nick.
Yeah, it should be a big one. I'm excited for you to see Kroger Field. You'll be down there on the field. They have some nice turf. You'll have a bunch of rubber chips in your shoes by the time we get out of there on Saturday afternoon. And I'm excited for a nooner. Thank you. Zach and I haven't left the stadium before like 1:30 in the morning on a Saturday. So looking forward for a nooner. If you are up in Lexington, holler at us. Zach and I will be out. I think
Saturday.
You really wanted to go to Goodfellas. I think that Goodfellas is like an end of the night Saturday thing. We might have to find a nice place to go.
We'll see. We'll evaluate. We're gonna end up at Goodfellas. I can tell you that.
I definitely want to go see KS Bar. Support the KSR guys there and see what those smoked wings taste like. But Lexington's a cool little city. I agree with Nick. I remember the first year I went. Didn't think it was going to be good, but there was I had a friend who lived there and we went and he showed me the town. It's a nice little college town.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. This is another state that I get to check off that I will have been to now. And if you're not going to be in Lexington, make sure that you are liked and subscribed to this Gators Online page to follow all of the content that we'll have coming from Gator Walk, pre-game, during the game, post-game. Definitely looking forward to bringing you guys a lot of content over at Gators Online. And make sure that you go to the site as well, not just the YouTube channel. If you're not subscribed, you can get in the door for just $1. And the Gators got a chance to keep racking up those wins, Nick. 3 in a row.
Yeah. And it's crazy because, how different will you feel a loss versus a win? Like a loss here, and now I don't feel good about Florida going to South Carolina in a couple of weeks.
No
and a win here, I think you show like, hey, we got our stuff together. We can figure it out on the road.
South Carolina harder to play at than Kentucky, you would say.
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay.
I would say
I've been to South Carolina.
Yeah, Kroger Field's it's small. 61,000, but for the size, it gets loud. For the size, for 61,000, they'll get loud.
And for the Florida Gators, it gets loud. So looking forward to seeing it. Appreciate Nick for joining us and giving us some perspective on the Wildcats. 4-0 coming into this matchup. They've yet to lose a game. They're 1-0 in SEC play, just like the Gators. So we'll see who prevails on Saturday. For Nick Del Torre, I'm Zach Albaverdi.